Made a lot of people very, very upset.
Well, I know, because they're idiots.
So part two of Masters of the Universe Revelation, season one dropped without much fanfare, deservedly so. Of course, I kept true to my word and didn't go through the Netflix route. I found other means to watch it so that I wouldn't give Netflix the hits or the revenue. Early on, before I even watched part one, I said to myself, I'm gonna watch it before I judge it fully because I don't want to say something is bad without actually having seen it and really looking at it, the merits of what it presented before I make an informed judgment on it. I finally watched the second half. Now, if you want my opinion on the first half, I'll link the video in the description. The first half wasn't good. What was my view of the second half of Masters of the Universe Revelation? Well, I'm gonna say that I disagree with Yellow Flash and Confish TV, and not that I disagree with them in the first place. I agreed with a lot of what they said about the first half because I felt the same way when I watched it. It was better than the first half. It wasn't good, but not terrible like the first half. The first half was definitely terrible. I'd give it a 1.5 out of 5. The second half I'd give maybe 2.5, maybe a 3 out of 5. But collectively, as a season, it would be a 2.5 out of 5. There was more bad than good, but the good was good enough to not make it a complete stinker. I listened to a stream by Pointdexter Lounge, and I heard him say, basically, and you're gonna hear, out of his own mouth that if you don't like the show, that's fine, but what you do after you don't like it that bothers him. What he's basically what he's saying is, you don't get to say how bad it is. You don't get to ruin it for other people, despite the fact that Kevin Smith ruined it for a lot of He-Man fans. That's okay. Those fans deserve to have their joy ruined, but not Poindexter Lounge. But we're gonna go into this, and we're gonna hear it out of his own mouth the things he says that I disagree with, and I'm gonna explain why.
I encourage you, if you say you're old school, first of all, make sure you're not getting caught up in this nonsense. Okay. Because there are people trying to spread things about the show and act like the show doesn't respect the original content. It does so much to respect the original content. It's crazy. It's insane. I would encourage you that if it's been a while, you go back and rewatch the original content because this is spot on. All this stuff that they're complaining about, oh, Tila is this way, Tila was that way back then. Like Tila had an attitude back then, even.
Okay, so while it calls back some lore, calling back on it is not the same as respecting it. I'm gonna recall an episode from the original Filmation series, Tila's Quest, which, when you think about it, Revelation is basically a 10 episode adaptation of Tila's Quest. Tila's persona, her behavior, her attitude in that one episode alone, it encapsulates the character as a whole. Her behavior, her reaction to things, her flaws, her vulnerability, her strengths, and yeah, she has what you would call, I wouldn't call it attitude. I would call it confidence. I would call it determination. When you're writing a female character, there's a difference between writing her as a determined person, as a confident person, as opposed to being a bitch. And in many instances, the Kevin Smith version of Tila is very detestable. Um, we go back to when Marlena and Randor are crying over Adam's death, and all Tila can think about is herself, and talk about how, oh, she's upset because they kept the secret from her.
My mother?
That is a secret I've promised never to reveal. Someday you will learn that secret, Tila, but not from me.
So Man at Arms made no bones that he was not going to let Tila know about the secret, and then she found out it definitely wasn't coming from him. But then Revelations undoes that character with this shot.
My sun and my moon, I beg your forgiveness. I'm sorry I kept so many secrets from you for so long.
Man at Arms kneeling before Tila, apologizing to her for keeping the secret. Wait a minute, that's not that Man at Arms is not consistent with the Filmation Man at Arms. Like, if Kevin Smith knew that, he would not have written that scene into the story. Clearly, he didn't understand Man at Arms. Man at Arms would be, apologetic for a lot of things, but withholding that secret about Tila's ancestry is not one of them. But in the Revelation series, Man at Arms is actually Tila's biological father, which is different from the Filmation series where he's the adoptive father. Now, I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't really think it was a big deal. If that's the route they wanted to go, and I understand they had to go, about 25% deviation from the Filmation series to avoid legal issues. So if that's one of the angles they wanted to change, I didn't have a big problem with that. I could have done without it. But again, it's not a deal breaker for me. Just like the organic web shooters from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, which I thought was an improvement over the web shooters that Peter Parker built in the comics. To me, I view that change in the same manner. So it's not a big deal. But that aside, if you're gonna say you respect the characters and are, doing some kind of evolution with their progress, having Man at Arms kneel before Tila and apologizing for keeping the secret when he told her not long ago that yes, I know your secret and you're not gonna hear it from me. To me, is a big deviation from the character, and it shows that you didn't understand the character, not consistent with the character at all. And as far as like Tila's progress, all you have to do is watch this one episode of the Filmation He-Man, Tila's Quest, and everything in this episode alone shows that we know everything we need to know about Tila, her doubts, her flaws, her strengths, her reaction to things. Revelation, all the Revelation did was just repeat those things, and didn't do it as good as it should have. Now that I've seen all 10 episodes, there is enough Masters of the Universe fans that didn't want to see Tila ultimately assuming the position of sorceress. That was a story that arguably was a story that we wanted to see, and it was a story that needed to be told. But sidelining He-Man to do that was not necessary, and I'll get into that in a minute, because Pointdexter Lounge repeats the lie that the show was literally all about He-Man, which is objectively not true. Now, I will say that I didn't expect, and I was pleasantly surprised by the last episode that not only did Tila revert back to a feminine figure when she assumed the role of sorceress, referring to her hair, which I'll touch on in a minute, by the way, but that the conversation between Adam and her hinted that there was still some slight romantic connection there, which will call back to the Filmation series. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised about that, and I was pleased with that because, yeah, if you look back at the mini comics, in addition to the Filmation series, the hint of attraction between He-Man and Tila is canon. So I was glad to see that at least in that scene, they kind of honored that a little bit, even though it didn't progress from there. But I will praise what deserves to be praised. I'm not going to bash the series as a whole.
If you don't like something, you just don't like it. There may be a plethora of reasons why you don't like it. I won't understand it.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about myself in terms of objectivity, subjectivity, all that stuff. There is such a thing as objective value in art versus me subjectively liking something and subjectively hating it. So, for example, Goodfellas, directed by Martin Scorsese, is an objectively good film. It's got great pacing, great acting, a lot of memorable moments, entertaining movie as a whole. It's an objectively well-made movie, and it's a movie that I absolutely love. Now, conversely, Battlefield Earth, which is objectively a bad movie with a lot of plot holes, bad acting, cheesy dialogue, and slight hint of propaganda, although badly done too, is objectively a bad movie, yet I still enjoy watching it because it's entertaining for me. I actually find the bad things about that movie entertaining, but you wouldn't hurt my feelings by saying, oh, it's a shitty film. I would agree with you, but I still like it. I still watch it because it's a fun, bad movie. Conversely, a movie like Taxi Driver is considered objectively good, and I concede that, yeah, people like it, people think it's a well-made film. I personally didn't like it. I've seen it multiple times, and I still come away feeling like there's something about this movie that I don't like. I feel like I could have made a better film. And in my opinion, Todd Phillips made a better film with Joker. That was an objectively good movie that I think did Taxi Driver a lot better. So when you like something, you got to consider, objectivity, subjectivity, all this and that. Just understand that liking something doesn't necessarily make it good. It just means you like it. And nobody can take anything away from that. The purpose for this video is not to take away Pointdexter Lounge's enjoyment of the series. It's simply just to show that the reason why people like it are pretty valid, and you don't have the right, Pointdexter Lounge, to call them idiots over it, and you don't have the right to insult them over it, because that's what you do. You insult those who hate the show. Don't get on that high horse and expect people not to call you out on it.
And so Filmation, the thing is a lot of kids watched the cartoon, right? I mean, I watched the cartoon, dude.
Yeah, but
He-Man-
I mean, at the end of the day, it's 80s propaganda. It was like, eat your vitamins and drink your drink your milk, kids. Don't take steroids like Hulk Hogan. 80s propaganda. 80s propaganda. 80s propaganda.
If the 80s Filmation series is propaganda, would that make the Revelation series current modern day propaganda, or is it somehow propaganda free? Despite the fact that it's pushing the same tropes that the Disney Star Wars sequels did, that the current Star Trek series is doing, that Doctor Who did, that the last Terminator film did, that all these shows are doing now. Do those shows have propaganda, or is it just the 80s series? Because if it's just the 80s series, then you have no understanding of who the demographic was for the He-Man property. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was a toy line that was created in response to the Star Wars line. Initially, it took its cues from Conan and eventually became its own thing. But when Roger Sweet created He-Man, he created He-Man basically knowing that it was meant to be an action figure. And action figure obviously are, if you want to get technical, they're dolls for boys. And He-Man was created as an action figure for boys, and the line was meant to be geared towards boys. He-Man was always a male-centric property, feeding into that masculine energy, and that's the issue that people had with Revelation, is that it was so feminine focused, and it deviated from the masculine energy of the property that obviously you're gonna piss away a lot of the fans that were the force behind the success of the IP. Whether it was them buying the action figures, buying the DVDs, the books, all that stuff. They made the same mistake that Kathleen Kennedy did with Star Wars, and when she pissed away half the fan base, you insulted the current fan base that made the property popular, and you drove them away. By the time that you end up with Rise of Skywalker, you lost half of the revenue, and half of the fan base turned their backs because you told them to fuck off because you didn't want their money, because they were racist, they were misogynist, they weren't for you, etc., etc., etc. People get tired of that shit. I'm sorry, but they do. They get tired of being told that. Know your audience, know your demographic, know who you're targeting your property towards, and never deviate from it if that's the target audience that brought you success.
He was more of this savage He-Man guy. Okay, he was savage He-Man, just like we saw tonight, right? And you see that in that cave? See how it's got like all the body armor and everything? The goddess was the one who gave him his armor. And so there he had the shield and you notice he doesn't have the power sword. He's got the axe right there. Notice that? He's got this little sword down here, but that ain't the power sword. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, folks. I am talking about Kevin Smith having paid respect to the actual lore of He-Man.
Now, I have the book as well that Pointdexter Lounge is using as reference. I have the same hardcover book. It was given to me on a Father's Day as a gift on Father's Day a few years ago. Now, let me read to you the first paragraph of this first mini comic that shows the quote-unquote savage He-Man. A mighty figure stood at the edge of the jungle that had, until this day, always been his home. He-Man, the tribe's greatest warrior, waved his farewell. He might have preferred to stay, but he had a noble mission to accomplish. Now look at the adjectives in that paragraph. Greatest warrior, noble. Those aren't adjectives you use when describing a character that's considered savage. The savage He-Man in the Revelations cartoon was Hulk-like, didn't communicate, was very barbaric and very violent. Now, mind you, I didn't necessarily have a problem with that character. I thought the scenes with him are kind of fun. So I'm not saying that that character was bad. I'm saying that this He-Man in the first mini comic was not a savage He-Man. This is not savage He-Man. This is actually very civilized, very, as the book described him, noble and great character. So not the same character that was shown in Revelation by any stretch of the imagination. So this is not Kevin Smith calling back to this character. He may have borrowed the image of it, but he definitely didn't borrow the character's persona or who this character is. It's as far as I'm concerned, it's two different characters.
And everybody griping about Teela. This story about Teela becoming, and I'm sorry, I've said it before, so I don't feel like it's spoiler because I said that this was going to be, but Teela becoming the sorceress, this journey of Teela's to become the sorceress was there from the beginning. Yeah. Literally episode 6, Brian, of the first season of the cartoon, way back in the day. Okay, they revealed that Teela was the sorceress's daughter. You know, this idea that like women can't do anything, like I'm really getting sick of this. Okay, listen. I have seen pandering. I have seen you know, I have seen the SJW stuff.
Well,
I've
if
seen
it's overly
all that
woke,
stuff, and that's
I'll be the
fine.
first one to tell you. You know what I mean? Like, but I didn't see it.
So Pointdexter Lounge uses the same tired SJW left-wing argument that anybody that disagrees with how Teal is portrayed or how any woman in a particular media is portrayed, oh, they have a problem with strong women. They're misogynists. They hate females. They hate women who can do things better than men. He totally misses the point here. It's the same SJW left-wing argument pushback against anybody that talks about the portrayal of Tila. Just like it was done with Ray, like it was done with Michael Burnham of Star Trek, just like it was done with a lot of other female characters. Yeah, there's a problem when you push the Mary Sue character of she does no wrong. Her only flaw is she's too perfect. She's afraid of being perfect. The portrayal of Tila is just like the portrayal of Rey in the Star Wars trash sequels. It's she's good. Everybody has to validate her goodness, her greatness. You know, we saw how many times was she validated in the sequels with whether it's Kylo Ren, whether it's Finn, whether it's Luke Skywalker, whether it's Yoda. You know, she got validated left and right in one form or another. And Tila gets validated by Orko, by Man at Arms. You know, even Scareglow validates her by saying that her only fear is that she fears of being great. I'm like, okay, so I'm just like Rey Skywalker. I shouldn't even say Rey Skywalker. It's really more Rey Palpatine, but whatever. I don't acknowledge that character as far as I'm concerned. She's non-canon. Yeah, it's the same tired trope of we're gonna make a woman so great, so good that her only flaw is that she fears being great because she's awesome, she's incredible, and we'll make all the men around her either vulnerable, weak, stupid, dim-witted. Again, you gotta know your audience. You gotta know who you're targeting towards. He-Man as a property has always been targeted towards boys and men, you know, males who want to identify with a strong male figure. So when you do a series like this where you sideline the strong male figure in place of a LGBTQized female who looks like a teenage boy, yeah, we're gonna have problems with that, and we're gonna have problems with the fact that you're doing the same thing that you did with Star Wars, that you did with Star Trek, that you did with Terminator, the last Terminator film where they killed off John Connor, and you had a trio of females, one of them an androgynous female cyborg. It's tiresome. It's very tiresome. To further the point, look at Netflix's She-Ra series, and taking away, putting aside the details about its agenda, what have you. It was a show about a strong female. It was marketed as a show about a strong female, and it never strayed from that. There was no strong male to take her place. She-Ra wasn't sidelined for 8 episodes while the strong male took over and we saw his journey. No, it was a show about She-Ra, marketed as a show about She-Ra. And when you watched it, it was a show about She-Ra because she was in it and we saw her growth and progression. Conversely, the first trailer that Netflix dropped showed He-Man because they knew, oh, the people want to see He-Man. You notice that the first trailer that never showed any clips from anything from episodes 2 to 5, with the exception of the 5th episode where Adam calls down the power and Tila's like, you know the words. Netflix knew who they were targeting towards. They made no bones about it. And they knew that if they showed or confirmed what had been revealed by Clownfish TV, that the show sidelines He-Man in favor of masculine Tila, the fans wouldn't watch it. And the proof is in the trailer when you showed basically most of the footage from the first episode and marketed it as, oh, this is what the show is about. Of course the fans were going to love it. They were going to be like, oh, wow, I can't wait to see the show. Now I'm hyped. Now it's like, oh, wow, they're bringing back my childhood. This is great. And those same fans, after they saw the actual first 5 episodes, changed their tune. They're like, what did I just watch? And like, no, the trailer deceived people. The trailer did the bait and switch. And we'll talk about that in a sec because Pointdexter Lounge references that and claims it wasn't a bait and switch. It absolutely was a bait and switch. We don't have a problem with strong female characters. We have a problem with female characters who are far removed from femininity and turned into masculine teenage boys in place of strong men, especially in a show that the central character is a strong man. Now, if you imagine them doing this shit with the Sheila Netflix show, I guarantee you the backlash would have been insane. You would have had tons of women, especially of the LGBTQ community, upset if Bo was put in the front lines as the main character of the show and She-Ra delegated to secondary status like He-Man was with his own show. You would hear a backlash unlike any you would have ever heard.
Here's what I want to talk about, because listen, I've had to put up with this with Star Wars. I've had to put up with it. Now they're going after Marvel. They can't like anything, Brian.
For fans to like anything, it would have to be something good for them to like. I didn't hear anybody trashing Infinity War. I didn't hear anybody trashing the Captain America films. As a matter of fact, I heard people praising the Captain America films. A lot of these movies got trashed because they deserve to get trashed. There's like a lot of them got praised because they deserve to get praised. Blindly liking something because of the brand is retarded. It's stupid. People have the right to dislike something, especially when it promises something that it didn't deliver on.
They don't know anything about Masters of the Universe. They're griping and complaining about something, and then they're trying to call Kevin Smith a liar. Well, here's the thing, guys. If you go to an event and you ask somebody to reveal the major spoilers of the program that's coming out, why do you want that information? Why? Why do you want that information? Why do you want that spoiler up front before the show ever comes out? And then you're going to sit there and try to hold the guy responsible. Look, this was a He-Man story at its core. It's all about He-Man, Brian.
When did Kevin Smith lie?
He didn't.
And that's the whole thing. Why does everything need to be spoiled for everybody?
So according to Pointdexter Lounge, the reason why Kevin Smith stated that the show was all about He-Man was because he didn't want to reveal spoilers. There's a way to, well, how about this? How about making the show actually about He-Man and not subverting expectations? Because subverting expectations does not work. It's a proven marketing death when you subvert expectations. People were with the leaks that were coming out with the articles and confirming the plot leak of the original script, it was becoming evident that He-Man was only going to be seen in one episode of the first 5 and not mentioned as much, and the show focuses on Teela and her strength and her journey. And Kevin Smith was like, no, the show's literally all about He-Man. Well, if you want to do a breakdown of the first 5 episodes and break down what happened in each episode, in the second episode we see Teela getting into a fight with Cyclops' cult, and then we see her interaction with the woman that reveals herself to be Evil Land, and the sorceress explains to Teela they need the sword, the two halves forged back into one, so they can bring the magic back to Eternia. If you listen to that dialogue between sorceress and Teela, the plan was not to bring He-Man back. The plan was to bring the Power Sword back, insinuating that Teela would be the one to wield it. That was the plan. In the third episode, when Man-at-Arms joins the fray, Orko joins the fray, and what have you. Yeah, Adam is mentioned. There was a quick flashback with Adam, He-Man fighting Merman. Other than that flashback, no, the focus is back on getting the Power Sword and Teela being the one to find it. And the fourth episode, when they go to the Subternia and Teela is fighting with Scareglow. Yeah, she fights with that fake He-Man, but it's He-Man being used as a prop to enhance Teela and to get her to overcome her fears and her doubts. And yeah, at the end of that episode, we see Adam. And then the fifth episode, again, the conversation, even though they're in Preternia and Teela is with Adam, the conversation was not about her bringing Adam back. And the fact that she didn't really express any real remorse over him being dead, it's, we gotta get the Power Sword and go back home. I'll see you around, basically. So it was never about bringing Adam back until Adam decided, okay, I'm coming back. Now, if you can prove to me on any of those 2 to 3 episodes how He-Man was the focus, based on dialogue, based on what was revealed to be the plot for each episode, I'm open to hear it. But I've seen those episodes multiple times in reviewing this and doing my videos to know for a fact. From 2 to 5, No, he wasn't the focus. It was Tila was the focus, and yeah, it was shipped to Adam in the fifth episode. By the last half of the fifth episode, it was about Tila's journey, Tila's story. That's objectively true from episode 1 to episode 10. Even in the episode 10, which I thought was the best episode of the entire series, but it was still Tila focused. The last fight was about Tila. She had the majority of the scenes. It took away from the grandiosa of the He-Man and Skeletor fight. She was clearly the focus of the series. So to say she wasn't is not true, objectively not true. And the tragedy of this is that you could have told this story. Here's the thing, and this is why I call back to the Filmation episode of Tila's Quest. You could have told this story of Tila becoming the sorceress. You could have had that journey without sidelining He-Man. That's the thing that bugged a lot of people is it isn't a story. It isn't that Tila's story is being told here. Is the fact that you had to sideline He-Man to do it. You didn't have to sideline He-Man. You could have still told the story, had He-Man come along, play along, and you still would have gotten, the same effect. You still could have gotten Tila having met her destiny and becoming powerful, what have you. You still could have had that story.
Luke says my friend is still very obsessed about that Kevin Smith tweet for the way he said he's not a fan of He-Man, and he said since 2013, and I was 19 back then, and I was like, bro, really? Listen, yeah, you know what? Look, I don't care when you came into being a fan. I told a friend of mine this, Brian, years ago, and I've shared this on here. I had a friend of mine who was 5 years older than me. Okay. Batman fan. Tried to tell me once that he was more of a Batman fan because he's read all the comics. I'm like, okay. And I'm older than you. I said, what the heck does that have anything to do with anything? And he's like,
right?
well, I read them first. Who the heck cares? We read the exact same stuff. Right? I mean, like, who cares if Kevin Smith was a fan of He-Man when he was a kid or if he later became a fan of He-Man?
Now, I have a problem with this because, number one, you don't know for sure that he became a fan at some point. So all you can do is assume. However, we have proof that he said he wasn't a fan. I don't care if it was in 2013 or 2021. He's on record as saying he's not a fan multiple times, that he has no great love for He-Man.
I have no love for He-Man. I
know, but I have no love for He-Man either, but he's got a place in the world in a comic book store. You can't make fun of somebody else's interest. You're like, He-Man's stupid. I like Batman. What's the diff?
Man, what kind of clerk is rude to customers?
He didn't understand Man-at-Arms. He didn't understand Tila. And more importantly, he didn't understand the target audience for this property. Now, am I saying that he's not a fan now? I don't know. Based on the result, I don't believe he is, especially considering that he got real nasty with a lot of the fans and told them to, that they need to grow the fuck up. That's not how you talk to fans of a property that you are allegedly a fan of. That's somebody that actually looks down on the fan base, that looks down on the property. And I go back to 1998. When Godzilla was purchased, the license to shoot the American version was purchased by TriStar Pictures, and Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich were hired to make the film. They were both on record as saying they were fans of the property, but then Roland Emmerich was on record later as saying that he didn't understand why people could watch these films of two giant monsters fighting each other. He said it was repetitive, and he didn't understand why people could watch it. Those are the words of somebody that isn't a fan. And as it turned out, it's objectively proven based on the movie that they made. Because that Godzilla film, known as Gino, is definitely the byproduct of people that were not fans of the property, were not fans of the character. Again, Roland Emmerich on record was saying that they weren't creating a monster, they were creating an animal. Godzilla is a monster, he's not an animal. So, proof that whether they claimed it to be fans, there was proof that they were not true fans after all. See, if you're a true fan of something, it shows. It comes out. Not in your words. It comes out in the fruits of your labor. Case in point, Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi was a huge fan of Spider-Man. And the thing is, he never had to say it. the films themselves were so well made and called back to what made the character so popular and iconic that it was evident that Sam Raimi was a fan of Spider-Man.
And the show was about He-Man. The show was absolutely about He-Man and the fact, how does the world exist? How does the world go on without its hero, without its champion? Guess what? They also did this in DC Comics back in 1993 when, I don't know, there's a little story called The Death of Superman.
Yeah.
And how does the world go on without Superman? They paid tribute to the man who had stood up for them and saved them all these times, time and time again. The only one who could save them fell finally. What is that world like? And Kevin Smith did an amazing job telling that story here.
He goes back to the DC Comics story of the death of Superman, in which you had about 12 or so issues of the Superman comics, in which Superman was not there because obviously he was killed and he was dead and buried. But here's the thing, though. He was still the focus because the whole focus of each story was about Superman. It wasn't about Lois's progression or Lois Lane finding herself and becoming super powerful and getting her destiny and being chosen as the one to save the Metropolis. No, the focus after Superman died was how the characters reacted to his absence, what they tried to do to make up for it, and ultimately when they went to see if he was truly dead, and then the revelation that no, he came back to life. Each issue was still about Superman. There was no side landing of the character because they were still speaking about him. He was still mentioned often. He was the focus of it. Everything was about what to do without Superman. Conversely, though, in Revelation, the plot was about bringing back the Power Sword. It was never about bringing Adam back to do it. It was hinted that Tila would be the one to do it. So based on the dialogue between Tila and Sorceress, they were prepared to move on without He-Man. That wasn't the case with the death of Superman in the DC Comics. And ultimately, that story led to the reign of Superman, in which the stories were literally all about Superman imitators, and ultimately the return of Superman himself.
Well, and look, we even got more about King Randor and He-Man's mom.
Right?
Dude, we got some in-depth stuff about his parents, for God's sake. We never learned any of that crap.
Okay, so this is evidence that just because you can write about something doesn't mean you should. Out of the blue, it gets revealed that Adam had some kind of daddy issues with King Randor, that he didn't feel validated by him, that he didn't feel loved by him. Now, granted, this does happen with, many fathers and sons, where sometimes the son doesn't feel that they're getting loved and the attention from their dad. But in many cases, those dads are either at work trying to provide for their family, doing whatever their purpose calls them to do. That was part of the family dichotomy of yesteryear that mainstream Hollywood likes to take jabs at. But that's neither here nor there. Point is, in none of the adaptations of the property, whether it's in the comics, previous cartoons, whatever, nowhere was it ever hinted that Randor and Adam had a bad relationship. And we never got any indication that Adam had issues with his father. So this is something that they just brought out of the blue because, again, it goes back to the point of you can't have strong men. You can't have strong masculine men. No, we have to find a way to bring them down, find a way to cut them at their heels, and present them as very flawed characters. And yes, again, I'm all for flawed characters, and especially in lieu of Randor's relationship with Marlena when it's revealed that there was friction because, since the death of Adam, Marlena seems to have had resentment towards Randor. There's no indication that there was issues with him and his mom. It's just him and his dad. So, we can't have the dichotomy of father and son without showing, oh, dad is flawed. Dad has the problems. Dad has the issues. It's tiresome. And it's not original. It doesn't take a brain to write that in because it's such an easy thing to do in the climate of today. Writing a story about a father and son and actually doing an honorable job of doing it and really showcasing the importance of fatherhood and masculinity in the son's life and forming him to be a good man, that takes a lot of a moral compass, as well as a understanding of a human bond between father and son to write that kind of story and to make it strong and effective.
Made a lot of people very, very upset.
Well, I know, because they're idiots.
And there you have it. According to Pointdexter Lounge, if you hate this show, you're an idiot. There's a lot of valid reasons to dislike this show. This show deserves all the criticism. The writing is flawed. It's not brilliant. The callbacks are lazy or misunderstood, like the Savage He-Man, for example. The characters are written poorly or not consistent with previous canon, like with Man at Arms and Tila. You can either go back to your hug box, mute people, silence them, whatever the case is, and just stay in your corner and just see what you got to say. But guess what? Whether you agree with people like Yellow Flash, whether you agree with people like Clownfish TV, and I don't agree with everything they say, but as far as a criticism of the show, it's valid because when you look at it objectively, yeah, the show is not perfect. It's actually very flawed. And I'm gonna say this: Kevin Smith's biggest flaw, aside from the fact that he's a hack writer, was the decision. His decision. I don't know if it's his decision or Netflix decision, but since he's the spokesperson, I'm going to lay it on his feet. So his decision to release the show in 2 parts was a very bad idea. Very bad marketing choice to do that. Because watching the show from episodes 1 to 5, as opposed to watching it from 1 to 10, it's very different. Because 1 to 5 clearly shows that He-Man wasn't the focus. 1 to 10 shows that, yeah, there was a bigger story being told. And while it emphasized that, again, He-Man is not the focus, when you see Adam's progression from episodes 6 to 10, it becomes a little more tolerable with the absence of He-Man. But it wouldn't undo the criticism that the show got. It's still valid, and it would have at least given people a better idea of judging of the attempt, I should say. The attempt to tell the story. Because the story that was being told, a lot of execution flaws in it. The execution was not good in many spots. And this is why I initially thought that Andra was going to be the next champion of Eternia, because everything was being pointing towards that. And this is again to show you how much of a hack Kevin Smith is. When He-Man or Adam would say to Tila, "I go where you go where I go," and then you see Tila having that same kind of conversation with Andra, and then the flashback in episode 2 where He-Man uses Tila as he grabs her by her arm and then he uses her as like a weapon against the bad guys. We see Tila do the same thing with Andra. Same thing. She does the same thing with Andra. And it's in that episode where we see Tila putting her arm around Andra in a way that calls back to a sort of lesbian relationship. Which, by the way, again, I was very pleasantly surprised that Adam and Tila maintained a connection of sorts, a romantic connection of some sorts, by the end of episode 10. The fact is, the story that Kevin Smith was trying to tell hinted at the opposite. So he didn't understand the story he was telling himself. Not that I would have liked to see that story, but it shows that even within his own canon, he was inconsistent with where he was going. That's why a lot of us thought He-Man was going to be sidelined indefinitely, and Andra was going to take over as the champion. Again, with throwaway lines in episode 5, like, "Oh, there will be other champions after you," and them saying, if you die again, it'll be permanent. All hinting at He-Man disappearing for good. But that turned out not to be the case. So Kevin Smith didn't understand his own story.
They literally said because she had shaved the side of her head that she was a lesbian. There's nothing in the show that points to her being a lesbian. And in fact, Brian, by the end, we see that her and Adam still very much have their relationship intact.
So Poindexter Lounge insists that there was nothing in the show that indicated that Tila was a lesbian. Okay, there's a reason why people pointed to that haircut as a reason why. That haircut that Tila had in that show is a queer haircut. It's a queer haircut. That's not debatable. Vice magazine had an article about it, and that hairstyle was one of the styles considered as a lesbian haircut. All you gotta do is look up lesbian haircut on Google, and it'll pop up very similar images. You look at Miley Cyrus when she came out, she donned that haircut. So did Ruby Rose. Ruby Rose, as a lesbian, she had that haircut. That is a lesbian haircut. That's not debatable. It's all hinted at a lesbian relationship. That's why I was shocked, and many people were shocked by the 10th episode when Taylor refers to Adam as her champion, her hero, and we see evidence of some romance, because that was clearly out of left field, considering all the all the signs point to Tila just forsaking men and just staying with Andra. And listen, I'm pleasantly wrong about where the show took Tila in terms of her sexuality, but that doesn't mean that the signs weren't there before that about the opposite being true. So you don't get to tell people Pointdexter Lounge that no, there was no signs of it. There clearly were signs of it, and again, it shows that Kevin Smith didn't even understand his own story that he was telling. There's a lot that was said in that stream, and I'm not going to respond to every single point because it's just going to reinforce what I'm saying about Revelation, which is whether you like it, whether you love it, whether you hate it, it is a flawed show, and it's not brilliant writing. It's very hack writing by Kevin Smith, but in my personal opinion, it went from a 1.5 to a 2.5. The episode 6 to 10 was not as bad as episodes 1 to 5. No, it's better because there was more focus on Adam than in the first 5 episodes. But Tila was still the main focus. There was still some bad writing in there. The pacing of the last 5 episodes, I mean, the pacing was bad. There was a lot of monologues. It was too slow. And let me talk about Evil Lynn for a second. And again, he points to the strong women stuff. Let's talk about Evil Lynn. Evil Lynn kills Panther, kills Pre-Eternia, all the heroes from Hero to Castle to King Grayskull. She murders them. She absolutely murders them. And then after Tila beats her, she gets away with no consequence. No consequence. She murdered an entire realm of spiritual beings, and she walks away with no consequence. She causes loads of damage on Eternia, and she gets no consequence. There's no tribunal for her. There's no trial for her. She's not executed. She's not in prison. No, she gets to walk away scot-free. I'm like, are you kidding me? That is awful writing. That's immoral writing. That's irresponsible writing. How can anybody watch that and not think, oh, it's because she's a woman? We're going to give her some kind of bullshit backstory about her parents wanting to eat her. And I'm like, that's the best you can come up with for Evil Lynn? Is that her parents wanted to eat her? Are you insane? That's the best you come up with? That's stupid. Why even have a backstory to begin with? Why not just accept that she's evil and just go with that? Sometimes you don't have to explain characters. See, Christopher Nolan understood this with the Joker. That's one of the only incarnations of the Joker that does not have a backstory, and it works for him. We just see him as evil, and we react to him as evil, as opposed to relating to him. You didn't have to give Evelyn a backstory. She didn't need one. All you needed to know about Evelyn was she was power hungry, she used Skeletor, and she baited and switched Skeletor and took the power and became ruthless and evil. That's all you needed to know. We didn't need a progression. We just needed that. And you still would have had the story of Tila getting to where she needed to go in her journey. But no, she got away with murder and destruction. No consequence. That is awful writing right there. Terrible writing. Oh, let me talk about Skeletor for a second. While it was great that he had the spotlight in some of the episodes in the second half of the series, the fact that he's seduced by Evil Lynn for sex, that's stupid. That's absolutely stupid. I can't think of anywhere in any canon where Skeletor was hinted of any carnal desire for anybody, for any female, any carnal desire. He's not human. And didn't the comic, the Revelation prequel, didn't it show that Skeletor already had a family back in his home planet? He had a wife and kid already. So why would he? Well, I mean, I had a problem with that too. It's like he didn't need a family. Skeletor is a demon from another dimension that came into Eternia to take the power of Grayskull for himself. You added carnal desires to Skeletor, and it makes the character embarrassing. It really brings him down a notch. So you again, another example of Kevin Smith not respecting a character from the show. But yeah, I said all I had to say about it overall. I mean, so overall, do I think that Revelation was terrible? I'm not gonna say it was terrible. I'm not gonna say it was good. What I will say was the second half brings the show up a notch, but it's still a pretty bad show in terms of its writing. The story wasn't bad. It was how it was executed that was terrible. And you could have told the story without sidelining He-Man. You could have told the story without diminishing Teela's feminine traits. You could have told the story without making Man-at-Arms a wimp before Teela. You could have told the story without Skeletor being, an incel. You could have told the story without Evelyn's bullshit backstory. And you could have told the story and offer Evelyn consequences for her actions. But what do you guys think? Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Write down what you think. Let me hear what you got to say. Do you agree? Disagree? Let's talk. Let's discuss this. Let's have a conversation. I'm not here to say to you that you're idiots for liking the show. Unlike Pointdexter Lounge, who says you're an idiot for hating the show. But let's have a conversation, see if you disagree, agree, whatever. It's always good to discuss this. Also, if you like the content, hit like and subscribe. And don't forget, Clockpeople is on Indiegogo. Check out Clockpeople, the mailing list. This is a book that's sure to offend you, if not make you laugh. I think you'll enjoy it. And Road Warrior Drake is on eBay. Go to my my eBay store. You can find Road Warrior Drake on eBay. And back the remaining copies that I have available. You can get it. It's available to ship right now. Once you purchase it, it'll go out to you that same week. So go ahead and get it. Thank you guys for watching this, and I appreciate your time and attention. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk soon.